So you have quite an exalted tradition that goes all the way back into the depths of prehistory. And a lot of these tribes and some of the early explorers even noticed that there are strange things going on here. Lights in the sky, sounds, deep rumbling sounds that would go on for hours from underneath the mountains. Strange craft flying around. Some of the descriptions that I've heard range from flying seed pods to flying pumpkin seeds to sky people, cloud people. Various tribes would have their own lingo or their own description of some of these aerial phenomena. But I have a sneaking hunch that what they were seeing 1,000 years ago is very similar in many respects to what people are reporting here in the end of the 20th century. And pretty much any type of unusual phenomena that is reported anywhere on the planet, to a greater or lesser degree, occurs here, and we have reports of it. Everything from haunted houses, ghosts, spook lights, cattle mutilations or unusual animal deaths, Bigfoot, strange fish and creatures in the high mountain lakes, aerial objects from every shape, size, and form and color that you could possibly imagine, from huge delta-shaped or triangular craft, a huge rectangular craft a quarter-mile long, small balls of light in every color of the rainbow that chase people through the woods sometimes, fireballs, green, yellow, orange, red, blue, white fireballs, strange undulating creatures that are partially manifest in our three-dimensional reality that flit across your living room floor, strange little robed creatures 2.5 feet tall that look like miniature Keystone cops in robes have been reported, spectral apparitions of pioneers and wagons, spectral horses, phantom trains, nuns that would bilocate from Spain in the 1500s and Christianize the Indians before the conquistadores even arrived. And as soon as they wound their way up the Rio Grande River Valley from El Paso, they noticed all the Indians were approaching them with their hands clasped properly, with effigies of crosses and little rosaries, that the Blue Lady, the white-skinned woman in the celestial-toned habit that would come and preach to them, and they were all sitting there waiting for the conquistadores to baptize them. And I'm telling you, Reed, it's a thrill a minute around here when things are popping. It's amazing the kinds of waves of activity, and generally this stuff comes in waves. If you have the fireballs, generally then you have craft sightings. If you have craft sightings, invariably you have military craft flying around, poking their nose around, trying to figure out what's happening. And often on the heels of that type of aerial activity, we have these strange aboriginal type effects of the undulating prairie dragons, as the Navajo call them. Bigfoot sightings blossom during the midst of UFO sighting waves, and it's a kaleidoscope of activity. And quite frankly, I've really had to maintain a really grounded perspective and really believe none of this stuff but accept all possibility. Because quite frankly, when you have a cop called me up 2 weeks ago and said, I was 3 o'clock in the morning, I was driving along the middle of town behind this truck, and all of a sudden the truck slams on his brakes and I almost rear-ended him. And I look out my window and I see the guy is looking out his window, and he's looking at this thing, and he asked me, he said, Chris, did you see the Michael J. Fox movie, The Frighteners, with the angel of death zipping around with a big cloak on? He says, that's what flew right in front of my windshield. Now, maybe an Adams State College student, 20 years old, maybe lots of beer, a little of this, a little of that, I'd kind of scratch my head and go, okay, pal, But this guy is like, a career law enforcement officer, and why the heck would he call me up and tell me a story like that if it wasn't something that he really believed to be true? So I think that's a perfect indication that the veil is very thin here. And people say, well, what is it about the San Luis Valley that makes it so strange or special? And I say, well, imagine taking a piece of taffy and stretching it. That's reality. And if you stretch it hard enough, holes appear in the taffy. Well, this is a big hole in the taffy right here. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why they're here, what it's about, what the agenda is. I don't even pretend to know. But I'm telling you, there is something going on here. No question.
And just a little brief bio on Chris. From 1992 to 2002, Christopher O'Brien investigated over 1,000 paranormal events reported in the San Luis Valley, located in south central Colorado, north central New Mexico. Working with law enforcement officials, ex-military ranchers, and an extensive network of skywatchers, he documented what may have been the most intense wave of unexplained activity ever seen in a single region of North America. And I will give he has several books. Stalking the Herd is one of his latest books. He has The Mysterious Valley, Enter the Valley, Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. He has several books out there, and please go check them out. I will give links to everything in the description below in the video. And welcome to the show, Chris. How the hell you doing, man?
Pretty good. A little under the weather. Just got back from my first cryptological conference. I've never actually been asked to speak at a crypto conference, so it was good. But I'm just so susceptible to airliner air that I think I caught a pretty nasty cold when I got back. But other than that, I'm doing good.
Yeah, I understand that. I swear I always suffering with, especially with my job, I always have, every few months I'm dealing with my allergies because I work in a paper mill, and it's dusty, it's dirty, and it's really just the air in general. It jacks up my sinuses. But yeah, man, I'm really stoked to have you on the show. I've been a big fan of your work for some time now. Been very familiar with your work, but you are known with you investigating into the San Luis Valley region in South Colorado, the north central part of New Mexico. But we're going to delve into some of that and strange animal deaths and touch on a little bit of Dulce. But let's go ahead and get into the strange animal deaths and mutilations. So I guess when it comes down to your book, The Stalking the Herd, give me a brief synopsis of this incredible book that I think it came out in 2014, correct?
Correct.
Give me a brief rundown of that book. I guess if just a brief Clips Notes for anybody that's listening to this show that will know, I guess, a little bit about the book, The Stalking the Herd.
Well, we do have quite a almost an incestuous relationship with cattle that goes back 35,000 plus years. And what I wanted to do was, give basically a Cliff Notes sort of course, if you will, course of study, looking at humankind's relationship with cattle and how that relationship has devolved over the years and gone from a sacred relationship where bulls and cows and calves were revered by ancient peoples and worshipped even, to the present where we unceremoniously, but in a ritualistic manner, slaughter a head of cattle every minute in this country to provide industrialized beef protein. And then along the way, starting about 50 years ago now, actually we had our 50-year anniversary here just a month or so ago of the first widely publicized case of this kind, called the case of Snippy the horse. So for the last 50 years, we've had this new wrinkle in our relationship with cattle, and that's the cattle mutilation mystery. And the book is about that particular mystery. But also, I'm looking at the underpinnings of where, how long it took us to get to this point, and what this particular mystery could be an indication of today in the modern era. Cattle are the most detrimental life form on the planet, besides humans. They're the largest source of freshwater pollution, the largest creators of deserts, the single largest cause of deforestation in the arboreal rainforest on this planet. We're cutting down rainforest to make room for more cattle. Cattle are just they're a scourge. Native Americans, when they first encountered herds of cattle, referred to them as hooved locusts. That they're like a swarm of locusts over the environment. And now with the advent of big agro and large industrialized protein factories, these incredibly nasty you know cattle farms and industrialized cattle processing facilities, we're dealing with a potential bombshell of health hazard, and the environmental and health issues are extremely important and not being addressed, I think, by the mainstream media and the lobby that protects all this activity. The cattle lobby, of course, is one of the largest and most well-funded and powerful political lobbies in this country that you never hear about unless you're Oprah Winfrey and you go on your show and talk about mad cow disease, and then blurt out you're never going to eat another hamburger again, and are instantly slapped with a $2 billion lawsuit by the cattle industry. So my book is a overall sort of overreaching, just all-encompassing look at our relationship with cattle, but then it drills down on the actual cattle mutilation mystery. Tens of thousands of cattle have been discovered by ranchers and farmers missing various soft tissue organs, whether it's the genitalia has been excised, often with an expert kind of surgical like precision. Rear ends have been cored out, reproductive tracts have been extracted, tongues are gone, missing deep from within the esophagus. The mandible bone is exposed, the flesh around the jawbone is exposed, often an eye or an ear, a patch of flesh is gone, and the rancher or farmer knows that this is highly unusual because he sees dead cows all the time, but he doesn't see this type of what appears to be experimental excision of organs. And so this is a real mystery. And there's a lot of people out there that are interested in things that go bump in the night, UFOs, ghosts, all these types of wonderful paranormal phenomena, but none of them leave behind thousands of pounds of physical evidence. And that's why I'm so interested in this particular mystery, because we do have forensic evidence that's left behind. And my book takes a look at this whole mystery from a very objective point of view. I'm not banging any drum or trying to promote any sort of agenda that I have in terms of my own thinking on the subject. I'm just laying all the data out there and sort of inviting the reader to come to their own conclusions. I just try to present it as as efficiently and as objectively as possible, and just allow the reader to come to their own conclusions. Now, I am going to come to some conclusions in my next book, which will be analyzing Stalking the Herd. Stalking the Herd is filled with all the data. My next book, Stalking the Stalkers, I don't know, Mute Speak. We have a couple of working titles.
When you plan on this book coming out?
I've been working on it for 2 years with a co-author, my mentor, David Perkins. There is no publishing date assigned to it. We're doing it slow and methodical. We still have a lot of work to do. I'm hoping that it should come out within a year and a half at this point.
Sweet. And we're going to get a little bit deeper, within this hour that I have with you, into the deeper, darker, mysterious things that's going on with these cattle mutilations. And of course, I want to get into Dulce and San Luis Valley a little bit. And I'm pretty sure it might be a connection there. But anyways, is Snippy still up for sale?
Yeah. Yeah, the articulated bones of Snippy are for sale. I think back in 2005, the bones were rediscovered, I think, in I think it was a guy's collection of all his curios that he'd been collecting over.
How much are they asking for it?
18,000, I think, was the price that, and they put it up for auction on eBay, and I think somebody offered 1,200. Make a great tie rack or a lawn ornament or something. But yeah, the bones are up for sale, believe it or not.
So let's go ahead and get into this. Now, okay, you're going to have two sides of the story. That with these cattle mutilations, some are going to say that is extraterrestrial in origin, or and you go on the other side that I tend to lean more towards is more government related. Now, with all your research over the years, what kind of conclusion have you come, I guess, to who is behind the events?
Well, again, I really haven't yet come to any hard, steadfast conclusions.
What's your gut tell you, Chris?
Well, my gut tells me that it's not one player involved, that there's multiple groups involved. There's overlapping agendas. I think we're seeing a lot of confusion that's being very artfully, I might add, sown. A lot of artful confusion that's trying to take the onus off maybe one agenda and put it onto another. There's just no one-size-fits-all answer to this. For every explanation that you can come up with to explain these cattle deaths, there's more than enough data to totally negate that explanation. So if you say it's aliens looking to gather genetic material to hybridize a dying race, or to provide some sort of weird food source to absorb through the skin, all these crazy, in my mind, crazy theories that have come up. My stock answer to the alien hypothesis as the perpetrator is, well, if it's aliens, why don't they pick the lock on a slaughterhouse and go in and get all the genetic material or food, material that they need? They don't need to be sneaking around in pastures, and if it's a government, what about the cases that we can't explain? Missing spinal cords, brains taken out of craniums with no break in the cranium, just high strange elements to a case that cannot be explained by, modern forensic science. So we do have at the core what appears to be a high strange, supernatural, if you will, paranormal element that has probably been there for thousands of years. It may be responsible for the ancient human practice of animal sacrifice to the gods. Okay, there is at the core something high strange and paranormal, and it's been here a long time. But the vast majority of cases, in my estimation, and it's an informed estimation, I might add, is that we're dealing with human perpetrated cases for the purposes of monitoring the environment. It's not so much the animal that's the target. It's the animal's location in the environment that seems to be the operative sort of target, if you will. And we're seeing organs that are taken that are the fastest regenerating organs in the body. So the most recent vestiges of the environment will be found in the soft tissue organs, the tongue, the reproductive tract, the mammary glands, the genitalia of the eye. These organs harbor the most recent vestiges of environmental impact upon the animals. So that being the case, it almost appears to me that we're dealing with an environmental monitoring program. It's, again, not so much the animal, but where it is in the environment. I think the majority of cases fall within that particular group of parameters. Again, it's almost like you see a high strange case occurs. This is a generalization, but I think it's fairly accurate. Yeah. We'll have a high strange case. It'll freak whoever is monitoring this. And there are, I'm sure, governmental bodies that are monitoring outbreaks of these types. So you have an outrageously strange case that occurs. The least likely case, type of case to be reported by ranchers, by the way. And then all of a sudden you have a blistering of cases around that case. It's almost like somebody says, oh, they're looking in this direction. Well, let's look and see what they're looking for. And so you have a bunch of cases that are perpetrated that are very proficient, very, very professional in their, the way the modus operandi of actually conducting these clandestine activities. They're very proficient. And so you see a blistering of cases around that. And then you see, if the media gets involved, which invariably, if there's a number of cases, they do, as soon as the media gets involved, then every dead cow in every pasture in in that particular region, amateur people who don't know what they're looking at cattle or seeing dead cows out there, and they're seeing what appears to be cauterized incisions. You hear this laser incisions. You hear that all the time.
Big
Animals
words in these,
drained of blood. Well, these are descriptions by people that don't know what they're looking at.
Oh.
Okay, I'm not a veterinary pathologist, but I've been around enough of them, and I've been around enough. A hematologist trained me. A couple of veterinary pathologists have given me pointers on what to look for. I've been around tons of vets, tons of law enforcement people. I've had doctors who have had cases occur in their ranches, for instance. So I've been taking notes and learning for a long time.
I guess so. Basically, you do have a lot of years of experience. So pretty much, you might as well say on-job training. So it's not like you're just Joe Blow. Like, what the hell am I looking at here?
But Joe Blow, when he sees in the paper that there's cattle mutilations in his neck of the woods, he's going to be on the lookout for downed animals. And when he sees one, and he sees the damage that a group of magpies or ravens or crows can do to a carcass, I've seen magpies carve a perfectly circular hole in the rear end of a cow to get into the body cavity to pull out all the viscera and everything. Remember, birds are your main scavengers, really, out in the West. Mm-hmm. Especially vultures, crows, ravens, raptors. I had a case scavenged by 50 eagles once.
Wow.
So and then once the maggot bloom bursts, the insects they polish off these incisional areas with their action, and small animals, insects, foxes. You have all sorts of scavengers that are looking for a free meal. And so after they've done their work on a carcass that's been laying there for a week or so, the animal looks like somebody came in there with a laser and lased these organs out. To the average person, they don't know what they're looking at. So then you have a whole, almost like you're pouring gasoline on a fire. First you have a real case, then you have some cases that appear around that case that are real but human perpetrated, and then you have all these misidentified scavenger action reports that run investigators like me and law enforcement around in circles, and it's a wonderful self-negating mystery. People say, well, Chris, why don't they just take the animal and instead of leave it there, leave it behind? And I tell them, well, if they took the animal, it would be grand theft larceny. You'd have official police reports. You'd have official investigations. If they leave it there, there's always plausible deniability. It's brilliant in its the way this whole thing has been set up. Oftentimes, ranching communities tend to be the most politically active, and militia groups and sort of right wingers tend to be rural. They tend to be well armed, and they tend to be scary to the government. So if you leave this behind, you sending out a message that, hey, there's certain things that you are not in control of. So, I've even had cases where big ranchers are using mutilations as a scare tactic and as a terror tactic to force other ranchers to sell out or to move or to stop, their operations. So it's a very complicated scenario here, and for people to say, oh, it's aliens coming down and gathering genetic material, to save their dying race. To me, that's ludicrous. It's the least likely explanation. We're dealing with something that's very closed system. We're dealing with some sort of supernatural predator, if anything, that springs up out of the environment, takes these cows down. My buddy and mentor, who I'm doing my follow-up book with, David Perkins, thinks that there could be some sort of collective unconscious sort of angst going on. We collectively know that cattle are the most detrimental life force on the planet besides us, and maybe collectively we're manifesting some of these cases as a way to warn us to stop using cattle as a protein source, that we're degrading the environment to such a degree that that cattle could cattle flatulence. Cows fart and burp one time every 1.5 to 2 minutes. 1.5 burping and farting cows.
That's about like me, Chris.
The ozone layer. I mean, it's the largest. It's the largest source of naturally occurring ozone depleting gases. Global warming is if you add up all the cow flatulence and burps, it dwarfs the output of cars and trucks. Okay, so maybe collectively we all know this on a collective level, and unconsciously, in a collective way, we're manifesting cattle mutilations to warn ourselves off beef. I mean, that's to the extent that we're going with our analysis here on this in this particular mystery. And like Padre Pio and some of the Saint Francis of Assisi could manifest through their sheer power of their belief, manifest the wounds of Christ, stigmata. This may be a cultural stigmata. We don't know until we really crunch the numbers and look at this whole thing.
What about a cultist? What have you come across any evidence that is just
Yeah, sure.
a lot of the mutilations are from people that are into the occult?
No, not a lot. A very few, but there are some. Yes, there are indications. There is a tie-in with ritual blood sacrifice. I'm the only investigator that will say this, but yes, there are a number of cases that do kind of hint around at ritual blood sacrifice. They're very rare, very few, probably even fewer than the high strange cases at the core of the phenomenon, but they are there, and we have ufology to thank for that. By the way, back in '71, when the first cases, of the modern era really first began, J. Allen Hynek, Jerry Clark, Jerome Clark, Kevin Randall, and some other, esteemed ufologists found these two guys named Dugan and Bankston. They were inmates in Texas prison who claimed they knew who was doing the mutilations. And so they took their depositions, and these guys said it was occultists that were doing this. They were part of an occult group doing this. When it turns out that they were making this all up, and they actually wanted to get better treatment in prison and get reduced sentences. But before that they were figured out, what they were actually attempting to do by coming up with this story, Alan Hynek had convinced the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agent Donald Flickinger to send out a memo to every sheriff's department in the country, warning them to be on the lookout for occult groups who may be behind the mutilation of cattle. And so this particular memo had incredible sticking power and has now become part of the cultural meme around this mystery. And now, you see a lot of those headlines in the papers, which is a vestige of kind of a direct descendant of that original memo, where now you have the media especially loves to use that particular headline: occultists blamed or Satanists blamed for the mutilation of livestock. There's very, very few cases that conform to that. There are some, but very, very few. Most of them are done with a sharp scalpel, with extreme expertise. They're done with precision. They're obviously looking for a particular something particular in the soft tissue organs. Occultists leave behind traces. They love to leave behind altars. I've had cases where organs have been left hanging in bags over from a tree branch over a case. Sometimes they'll. I had one case where they they cut off the tail and then combed out the tail very, very carefully. You have candles, candle wax, that sort of thing is left around. These cases are very, very rare, and they generally happen to smaller animals, not cattle.
But Chris, I'm going to tell you why I think it might be more government related, or some deep cabal out there that is working these nefarious acts, behind the scenes. All right, the first one being, of course, the media. They like to first, use the extraterrestrial alien card. And at first, when they say things like that, because I've seen videos on YouTube where these kind of mutilations, are they a part of these alien experimentations or whatever? And first, okay, me being very skeptical, Chris, I start thinking, okay, is the government using the media, or whoever's behind these events using the media to steer away in the wrong direction? Kind of like giving us false information to try to make us not point fingers at maybe the government or some other group out there, some dark group. And then secondly, I think that with all these cattle mutilations, I think that it's, because I'm sure you've heard of Jim Keith, right?
Oh, yeah. He interviewed me for his Black Helicopter book.
And, and that's what I was about to say. And secondly, Jim Keith has talked about the black helicopters, and he wrote a book about it. And a lot of these cases, of course, these black helicopters, that's why I say I don't think it's ET in origin. It's got to be some kind of government or whatever, because a lot of these cases, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, of mutilations, they actually are seen with days before or even during or close to the time black helicopters are flying around.
Yeah, hundreds of sightings. In fact, Tom Adams, who was one of the first real researchers into this whole mystery back in the early 70s, he cataloged, by 1990, he had cataloged 350 official reports of helicopters in and around mutilation sites. And since 90, we've had probably at least another 100 or two more. So, we're up around 400 to 500 helicopter reports. When you talk about the media and the whole alien angle, let's get real. The reason why the media goes with that particular angle is because they are called by researchers reporting cattle mutilations, and the next thing out of their mouth is aliens are coming down and doing this.
Yeah.
It's the cattle mutilation research community that's responsible for the sensationalization of this particular mystery, at least in terms of blaming aliens for it. I could name a number of investigators who are just waiting for the next case so that they can call the media, promote themselves, and also promote the theory that aliens are coming down and mutilating our livestock. And we have no one else to blame but ourselves for that one.
Exactly. And let's go back to Snippy just for a moment, Chris. Is that the first documented case of cattle mutilation, or is there another case or how long has this been going around, and is there an older documented case out there?
Oh, there's many. There's tons of cases back in the 20s, cases all through the 30s and 40s, cases in the 50s. But the earliest outbreak of livestock deaths that can't be explained that I found is 1605, 1606, during the reign of James I of England, right when Macbeth was being premiered at the Globe Theatre, and Guy Fawkes was trying to blow up the House of Lords and the gunpowder plot. During that fall and winter of, and then early 1606, late 1605, hundreds of sheep were being reported being mutilated around London. And, it's a very interesting quote in the records of the Crown. The last sentence is particularly intriguing, but basically what they're saying is these animals are found dead, inward parts are gone, but the hide, the wool and the meat is left behind. And of this, sundry conjectures, but most would agree that this tendeth toward fireworks. Is the last line of the. So yeah, we go all the way back to 1605, 1606. There are reports that I've been unable to find the documentation of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, where peasants were petitioning the pharaoh to have the priests figure out who's coming down and mutilating livestock in the Nile River Valley. I have yet to find documentation to support that. But for many years, I had the same rumor about, early 1600 cases, which took me years to finally find the source and track it down, but I did. So there's even a possibility that all the way back into the Middle Ages and all the way back as far as the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, that we have reports. Now, again, I think it's important to note that the Snippy case is the first widely publicized case. It's the first case that, word of it went around the world. My very first exposure to the cattle mutilation mystery, and this may be, something that I need to come to grips with. I was 10 years old with my mom in a Safeway in Bellevue, Washington. We were grocery shopping on a Saturday, and it was the fall of '67. And, I happened to see the headlines of "Flying Saucers Killed My Horse." And so I'm looking at this gruesome picture of this horse with all the flesh gone from the shoulders to the tip of its nose, all the hide and the meat and the connective tissue and the tendons, and everything's gone.
Yeah.
And they're pointing at it, scratching their heads. Of course, I had to bug my mom for the 25 cents or however much it was to buy the paper, and I devoured the article, and that's how I first was exposed first to San Luis Valley, and second of all, it's my first exposure to the whole concept of an explained animal mutilation. So I got kind of almost a real time exposure to the mystery back in '67. And I back engineered this event. When I moved to the San Luis Valley, I lived about 50 miles away. Not even. I could actually see the area from my porch where the horse was mutilated. But the reason why it gets a whole chapter in my book is because it is a pivotal sort of Typhoid Mary kind of event in the annals of this particular mystery. And I do feel that I probably know more about the case than anybody, and have done more digging on it than anyone. And I feel it is very, very key. We have a lot of the creations of the original memes of aliens being involved, of flying saucers being involved, um, of government possibly being involved. All these memes pretty much can be, it's the Kenneth Arnold, shall we say, of cow mutilations. What Kenneth Arnold was to the modern age of ufology, this Snippy case is to the modern age of mutology. And it's a pivotal case. I was able to befriend the husband of the owner of the horse. Nellie Lewis killed herself in '76, but her widower, Burl Lewis, lived on till he was 100. Actually, he died about 10 years ago, and I have the only full length video interview that I conducted with him, and some of the stories that he told about other things that were going on in the area. There were hundreds and hundreds of UFO sightings, strange military activity, government agents lurking around trying to figure out what was going on. It was part of the infamous Condon report. It was case number 32. So it's a very complicated event. It's not as cut and dried as people with a peripheral knowledge might think it is. It's much more involved than you would guess. And so I do urge people, if they're interested in this particular mystery, that is the Typhoid Mary Kenneth Arnold of all the cases.
And that's kind of what I want to get into is going forward a little bit with this high strangeness, because, you talk about the San Luis Valley area, and that's not too far from Dulce, New Mexico. And between that and Area 51, for an example too, isn't too far away, but what I'm trying to say is within this general perimeter of one another, it seems like a lot of crazy things are going on. And of course, these cattle mutilations are pretty much in the center of it as well. But do these cattle mutilations have any ties to the San Luis Valley? And do they have ties to Dulce, New Mexico?
Well, they do, in that cases have been reported there. I've often wondered why the San Luis Valley, why does it seem to be kind of an epicenter of sorts? And one thing that I discovered about the valley, it's surrounded by mountains, and it sits at the highest point in North America. It's the world's largest alpine valley. It's 7,500 feet above sea level. And because it's surrounded by mountains, it kind of has its own airspace. It's radar invisible below 18,000 feet. It has no measurable pollution. And that's important, because if we're dealing with an environmental monitoring program, you're going to need control data. You're going to need data that's as pristine as possible. And if there is an environmental monitoring program going on, they're going to need to bounce findings from elsewhere against the control group of data. And I think possibly the San Luis Valley may have been targeted or fingered as a place where you have the most pristine environmental factors at play. There's no measurable air pollution, water pollution, all these sorts of things. There is one source of pollution that does come in at the center of the valley from a Superfund site, but pretty much by and large, it's one of the most pristine areas ecologically and environmentally in the continental United States. So it would be a perfect control group for any sort of scientific environmental monitoring program. You need a control group of animals. And so that's one possibility that we've been considering. Again, Dulce, My personal feeling on Dulce, it's a big red herring. I think the government has been promoting this whole alien thing ever since the Paul Benowitz case unfolded back in the early 1980s. Um, Anybody interested in Dulce should read Greg Bishop's book, Project Beta. It's all about the Air Force Office of Intelligence literally driving a scientist crazy. And in the meantime, inadvertently or by design, starting the myth of the Dulce base, having done quite a bit of quiet sleuthing around there, making inroads with ranching families, with Department of Public Safety, the head of Department DPS there, Hoyt Velarde, and others. I'm pretty convinced that what we're dealing with there is a red herring. I've uncovered evidence that there may be some sort of tunnel that's been built between Los Alamos, which is directly south of there, the Los Alamos National Lab that goes up to Dulce. And based on what I've been able to determine, it seems like they buried a lot of very noxious chemicals and nuclear waste underneath the Hickory Apache Reservation because they didn't know what to do with it. So let's pay the Indians off and we'll bury it on their land since it's not part of the United States. So I think, Dulce has turned into this big, kind of urban myth as far as I'm concerned. Sure, there's a lot of strange activity there. Sure, the Manuel Gomez Ranch had over 100 mutilations. There's been
That's
hundreds.
why I think there's a connection with maybe possibly cattle mutilations because that's kind of in that same area as well. And
Well, he's right outside of town. Yeah, but Gabe Valdez, the New Mexico State Patrolman, who I worked with very closely for a number of years, and who was one of my mentors, he was very convinced that the government was involved, that the government was perpetrating these mutilation cases around Dulce, and he scoffed at any talk of alien bases or anything like that. He thought it was all a bunch of hooey. He didn't buy into any of that urban myth stuff at all. And I don't either. All the stuff about Nightmare Hall and Phil Schneider's, Myrna Hansen, Thomas Costello, these people. I think they were all just disinformation agents, to be honest with you. I don't see any evidence to back up any of the assertions that there's some sort of alien base underneath Dulce. What you're more likely to see are small 2-foot-high dwarves that seem to populate the area there, that run around. It's the most common thing, strange thing seen by the Hickory Apache. And there's very little talk about some of the things that go on there that can't be explained. And these small, elementals, these dwarves, are by far the most commonly seen unusual manifestation of the unusual, let's say, that you'll hear about at Dulce. Everybody sees them. Nobody talks about them. It's one of the biggest kept secrets there. But
do you think it's possible, Chris, that if the Phil Schneider story, some of the things he was stating, instead of seeing actual extraterrestrials, he was actually seeing these dwarves?
That's possible, although they don't look anything like your typical alien greys. They're stocky, they're dark, they're swarthy, they're very athletic. I've been chasing down footage from the old casino before they moved it to the new location of these dwarves jumping up and down and denting people's hoods in the parking lot, and evidently security cameras caught this. And I've got an outstanding $10,000 reward for a copy of this footage. If you go there from the outside, you're a TV crew or you're some, hot shot investigator from anywhere but there, and you walk into that town, they're not going to tell you squat. They don't give a fuck who you are, what you're about. They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, and then they're going to, wash their hands of you. It's only by cultivating relationships, being somebody that has a fairly local phone number, that you're going to get them to open up. Native Americans are extremely close to the vest. Let me tell you, I've been walking in these particular realms for a while, trying to make headway in the Navajo res, Apache reses, the Pueblo Indians, the Hopi, the Zuni. I've spent a lot of time cultivating relationships and with these peoples, and it's only after you've known them for years that they
Mm-hmm.
finally start to open up and tell you what they really think. And any hotshot, you know, the investigator come from the outside stands a snowball's chance of hell of really getting the inside skinny on anything there. So anyway.
So is Dulce still currently? Are they still in operation today? Is there's really something still going on up to today? And it's not just something that happened in the past.
I don't know. I have no idea. All I know is that when they blew that 47 megaton nuclear device off underneath 5,000 feet down below Dulce to free up gas, they created the perfect cover for all the noxious um, nuclear waste that they are
Did.
allegedly storing there.
And when it comes to this region, with the San Luis Valley and Dulce, uh, and you also talk about portals as well. And of course, with all this high strangeness that goes around in that area, and many people go in that area, they talk about that certain types of healings have been done. And there's just something magical in the air and something magical, almost like sacred ground over there. So do you think that area has some kind of connection to some type of portal?
Well, yeah, and I think there's also there's very good evidence to support the contention that there's an ancient underground tunnel system that crisscrosses much of the Southwest. There's tons of apocryphal stories and claims over the years that go all the way back to the 1800s of people stumbling upon ancient tunnel systems underneath the area, and the government may have discovered these. In fact, I'm almost positive they have, and they've not only utilized these tunnel systems, but they've expanded them, and they've actually made it into a very viable means of transportation between facilities and this sort of thing. Um, Everybody's always telling you to keep your eyes to the sky, and I always say, well, I think you'd be better off if you keep your ear to the ground. There's a lot going on below us that it really hasn't been studied. A lot of attention hasn't been placed. I think, the whole keep your eyes to the sky thing has been kind of keep people's attention diverted. It's been
Exactly.
a bit of a red herring. I do really have a sense that we are dealing with an immense infrastructure that is underneath us, especially here in the Southwest. Maybe not so much elsewhere, but
Richard
we have
Sauter talks
geology.
about these underground interconnected tunnels across the U.S. I think it's Richard Sauter, correct?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he is the preeminent expert as far as I'm concerned. Underground bases and tunnels. What is the government trying to hide? I think is the Bible for anyone that wants to begin their journey into the the netherworlds of what's going on underneath our feet. Uh, when it comes to portals, though, I think we're dealing with something that Native Americans have known about for thousands of years. I think that they were able to identify particular areas and regions and locations that have a special sacred quality. And I've come up with a formula actually to identify a portal area. Basically, if it has unusual geophysical properties, which is oftentimes the close proximity of minimum maximum field strength in the Earth's magnetic field, gravitational lows tend to be there. Places where there's alternating layers of water, sand, and gravel, kind of natural batteries. Places that have a tradition of sacredness are often accompanied by geophysical anomalies. Places where you have overlapping waves in a variety and intensity of unusual phenomena that you won't find outside the area. Places that the government has a real active interest and is trying to expand their presence. If you have those five things in an area, chances are it's a portal area. And if you sit there long enough, you're going to uncover all kinds of stuff. It's what happened when I got to the San Luis Valley. It's a classic Petri dish of unusual experience. There's tons of areas. In fact, I've got areas that are 100 square yards that I'm convinced is a doorway to another world or another, type of realm of reality. And I've had a world-class investigator and accompany me to one of these areas and have an experience that you won't ever forget.
Yeah.
So, uh, you have to actually get out there and do the work. And if you're a local in one of these areas, then much of your work is done for you, because if you honor people's requests for anonymity, credit people where credit is due, make inroads with the native population, befriend local law enforcement, and get them to trust you. It's amazing what you can uncover, and the types of information and the educational type of process that you're going to be going through. I'm very fortunate in that way, and unfortunately, people come up to me and say, "Man, I just been devouring your books, and how come I've never heard of you? God, this is incredible stuff." And it's very simple. I don't go around promoting myself. I don't call the media to create a cult of personality
That's
around
why
myself.
that's why I have mad respect for you too, Chris.
Yeah, you call me. I didn't call you, dude. I don't call anybody to promote myself. You guys find out about me, and sure, I'll talk about it. But I'm in it as a personal quest for knowledge. I'm in it, for myself. I'm being selfish here. I'm on a quest that's very personal and very individual to me. I will write about it and I'll share it. If people are interested, sure, I'll share what I got. But I'm not going to go around there trying to, be Tom DeLonge or Linda Howe or Richard Hoagland or Corey Good or David Wilcock and all these. I consider them, posers. They're sensationalists. They're trying to create a cash flow. They're trying to create a business model around themselves and their theories and their foregone conclusions. To me, that's BS. It's bullshit. I don't do that, and I will not do that.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to make some money, but there is something wrong when you're misleading people, if you know what I mean.
Well, anybody that is involved in this realm of investigative work, and that's their sole source of income, they are absolutely suspect in my book. Okay. I have a real life. I have jobs that create my cash flow for me. Unfortunately, this work has gobbled up most of my life savings. It has cost me a fortune. I put 300,000 miles on my truck in 6 years. So you really have to have a passion for it. You have to have a proper motivation. Invariably, if there's a wobble in your motivation, if there's any sort of kind of squonky.
What gets you motivated, Chris? Like what? Because I've listened.
I'm just a curious guy, man.
Because I've listened to many of your interviews and I've seen videos on YouTube, and you seem very positive in nature, and you just stay optimistic. Like, is it because you are getting close to maybe what the truth is, or you just want to keep digging for the truth? What is that driving
I'm
factor?
trying to leave a legacy. I'm trying to provide people that come after me with a litmus test of how to gauge the veracity of a particular set of information, a particular set of knowledge. I think it's important for us to leave succeeding generations, to tote the rock down the field. Basically, I'm just toting the rock down the field, and I'm hoping that passing the baton to others coming from behind me that realize that I'm the real deal. I'm not here as some sort of disinformation agent or someone that has some self-serving agenda. I'm totally open source. I'm open. My all my data has been available to anybody that wants it for 20 years. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not keeping anything secret. I'm trying to be as honest and as objective and as level-headed and grounded as I possibly can. And if I can be of a help to somebody coming along, I've done all the work. I've done a lot of your legwork for you. Go ahead, take the ball down the field a little further. I'm just, it's very altruistic. I must say, I'm not in this, for any sort of personal gain, glory, or any of this stuff. The only reason why I write books is because I'm the only one that can write them. And if I don't write them, they ain't going to get written. So, that's, you want to know my motivation? That's it.
And I should have asked you this a while ago, because we are winding down on the show this time, Chris. What I meant to ask you a while ago, and it kind of really just popped in my head. I actually thought about it earlier, but you were speaking. but it just crossed my mind again. Is do you think that there is a connection to these cattle mutilations and possibly to the thousands of people across the world that go missing each year?
Well, I just spoke at David Paulides' Missing 411 conference, the Mile High Mystery Conference, this past weekend. So interesting. You should ask me that. Um, I've never really given it much thought. I have tried to dive into the whole realm of human mutilations. They do occur. They're very rare. They're probably the most covered up crime in the pantheon of crimes in the law enforcement annals. It's very, very difficult and almost impossible to get any information about ongoing investigations. Don Ecker, who's been a long time associate and friend, he was a homicide cop in Pennsylvania, and I think in Philly, and he spent a good year and a half, 2 years trying to get to the bottom of some claims of human mutilations, and he ran into an absolute brick wall. And this is a guy that was part of the law enforcement community for years. And so, you would think if anybody had a chance to ferret out some information, he'd be the guy. But this is a very difficult realm to investigate. Richard D. Hall in England has come up with some very interesting cases, and possibly a secret branch of British military that is dispatched to cover up cases of this sort. There were claims of a case in 1979 in Idaho. There was supposedly a case in the 60s at White Sands military base, which is equivocal. There's not much documentation, if any, to back it up. I had a possible case down in Silver City, New Mexico, that I really, really dug into and was just hit a brick wall no matter where I went, even with good law enforcement sources. They told me, don't, back up, turn around, go away, don't dig. So whether there's a connection or not, I don't know. Cattle are an almost identical match to human hemoglobin. If you're a universal receiver of blood, in other words, any blood type can contribute blood, and you could use it for a transfusion. It's the same as a universal donor, a universal receiver, whatever the term is. You can survive a transmission of cattle hemoglobin in an emergency in lieu of human blood. So, if you look at it scientifically, our blood is a genetic match to 99.9 to 9 places, 999999999 to cattle hemoglobin. So, are all these missing people the real McCoy, and cattle are just a possibly a second option? I don't know.
And it kind of brings up, whenever we start talking about this, like you're saying, the real similarities, especially with the blood between cattle and humans, and kind of brings up abductions, whether you believe it's ET or government. Maybe there is a connection with the human abductions, and possibly, I know these cattle mutilations aren't technically abducted, but they are still being mutilated, such as these abductions by human beings as well.
Well, the abductions don't feature mutilation. They feature medieval, quality experimentation. Using technologies and instruments that we have outgrown already for years. There's something that just doesn't quite add up with a lot of the abduction phenomenon. I'm still totally, I really don't know what to think of many, if not most, of the claims. There is something, I think, at the core going on. I don't think it's anything like what the pop culture version of it is. I think there's something infinitely more interesting going on that may have to do with human psychology and possibly some sort of psychic component. But I'm not sure. Your question whether all these missing people, thousands and thousands of people missing, maybe that they're being mutilated on some experimental tables somewhere, until we have the data to back up any sort of connection. I'm not going to factor it out, but I'm sure as hell not going to factor it in at this point. We really don't have any data to support that, to be honest.
Yes, and And I appreciate your time this time, Chris. And I want to have you back on in the future to discuss other things out there, because I know you talk about the paranormal, many other topics or genres in the paranormal.
Oh yeah, everything.
But where can people support your work and find more of your research?
Well, I do have a website, Our Strange Planet. We live on a strange planet. It's OurStrangePlanet.com. OUR, Strange Planet. And, I do have one of the top podcasts, radio shows that cover this whole realm, the Paracast. So go to theparacast.com, TheParacast.com. We've been around for almost 12 years. We have 600 plus shows in our archive. It's all free unless you want the extra, special $1.50 a week version, which comes without all the commercials and has an extra 30-minute show on there. So theparacast.com or Our Strange Planet. And of course, if you go to Our Strange Planet, you get any of my books all autographed, and I throw in a bunch of freebies and stuff in there. And if you'd rather just get a cheap book and no signature, go to Amazon.
And thank you very much, Chris. And we will definitely talk soon. Thanks, man.
Sure, my pleasure.
And stay right there. And that is Chris O'Brien. Go to his website, OurStrangePlanet.com. I'll give the links to everything in the description below. Check it out and just let me know your thoughts in the comments. He is very, very informative and knowledgeable on the paranormal and especially cattle mutilations. And just I got many other interviews coming up soon, so stay tuned. And I have some face-to-face interviews that I will be doing very shortly as well. But anyways, until next time, you keep truthing and have a good one.